Hello, hello, hello. It's your good friend, Wild Philosopher, here with your regularly scheduled reminder that gnomes are real. I'm here with my good friend, Hound of Heaven, and today's mostly an experimental day. We are, this is our first time testing out a live stream, which is working out the kinks. I maybe should not have said that word. I said working.
We're working all the kinks.
We're working all the get banned off YouTube in our first 40 seconds. But yeah, just test it out a little bit. Test it out a little bit. I like how I said experimental stream and immediately everyone left. It's all good. It's all good. C'est quoi c'est. But as I was saying, bit of an experimental stream tonight. We're basically going to be testing everything out, going over what exactly we're doing here. Why does this live stream exist? What is it for? What are the sorts of things we'll be discussing, not just here, but on the channel itself? So yeah, without further ado, most of you know me. I've been on this channel for a few years. I started it up during COVID when I wasn't in a great place at the time. Went on to do a lot of study after that, a lot of soul searching. It has been about 4 years, and we're relaunching the channel. Try and personally, I have been very concerned about the sharp decline in people's ability to think and their ability to wonder, their ability to care. So that's basically this channel. Philosophy in the purest sense. We're here to teach you epistemology, phenomenology. We'll go into a little bit of hermeneutics. That's the study of how we interpret texts, philosophy of language, and then we'll branch off from there into subjects like epistemology and character, biblical hermeneutics, or the hermeneutics of, say, the Analects of Confucius, issues in virtue ethics, the importance of trust, of caring, the home, the other subject, technical term in philosophy, and of course fairies, which are 100% real. Hound, how would you like to introduce yourself here? Or would you like me to introduce you?
I am Hound of Heaven. I am the guy who hangs out and voice calls with Wild Philosopher here and listens to him rant. So I thought I would make that official and come on stream with him. And to summarize that long list of very technical terminology, we're here to make absolutely everyone angry as we poke at everyone's sacred cows.
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah,
we are going to start all of the drama, which we will begin today.
Yeah, we're here to barbecue barbecue that golden calf, make a nice beef steak. Moving forward, live streams will be on Sunday nights. I'm not sure if they'll always be at, it is 9 p.m. EST, but I think it's 6 p.m. PST. I'm not sure if that'll be the regular time moving forward. It'll be dependent on how long we go, right? If we go 4 hours, I don't like going to bed at 1 a.m. So if we go 4 hours, we'll be moving the time forward. If we're done with this in an hour, half an hour, 9 o'clock. But yeah, expect regular Sunday sessions. This week, as I said, getting everything worked out. We'll just be doing a brief discussion of what does it mean to be a man, or what's manliness in the book, the Tarzan books, not the movies, the books, and in the writings of Plato, specifically his Laches. I just mispronounced that. The Laches is not one of the best known works, but it is the one where he deals with the question of Andrea, which is usually translated as courage, in spite of the fact that it rather obviously, like andro, to be a man, like manliness, courage. Next week, we'll be going into Delicious in Dungeon. What do you call it? I want to say, I know we have it in the notes. We in the notes we have it as autistic representation. That maybe has the wrong connotations for people who are used to discussions of quote unquote representation, because that's not really what we're aiming for. We're really going to be looking at what does it mean to sort of build a home, and what might that look like in an artistic work. Maybe not in a moral sense, just in an artistic sense. The week after that, we have no chosen media theme yet, but we'll be discussing how epistemology, just to define key terms here, epistemology is the branch of philosophy that deals with how do we know what we know, knowledge formulation. It's a little broader than logic. Like most of us know logic, and logic in philosophy is a formal discipline concerned with proofs. Epistemology is much broader and it'll include, it won't include logic, but it touches on all sorts of other issues relating to the nature of knowledge and the function of knowledge and the relationship between knowledge and language and knowledge and eternity and knowledge and other people. We will be looking at knowledge and good character.
And we'll hopefully find a more catchy and drama-filled title by the time we begin streaming that.
Yeah, hopefully we'll find hopefully we'll find something nice and explosive, fiery. We're masters of philosophical clickbait here.
Yes.
After that, we'll be launching into the basics of hermeneutics with a discussion of why the anime Pope is the dumbest trope ever, for lack of a better word, or lack of a better way to put it. We're just going to... I love anime. I enjoy isekai. We're just going to rip it apart. We're going to rip it apart in a nice way, in a really, really nice, pleasant, friendly way.
I'm going to rip it apart in the nicest possible, kindest way. We're going to dismember it and set it on fire as an effigy for all to gaze upon before assaulting the earth in our wake.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, we'll be covering hermeneutics, study of textual interpretation in its broad sense. That will include study of sort of reality or interaction as interpretation. I know that sounds a little vague. It'll be clearer in future. Wow, yeah, I was expecting our intro to take way longer. We've only been going at this 8 minutes. Alrighty, 9 p.m. start time. Here we go. So without further ado, as I said, after that, we'll be getting into a whole bunch of other issues in epistemology. I'll be doing personal streams covering / governing, coining some neologisms tonight, unique issues in epistemology that maybe shouldn't be covered in a long joint stream. I've been attempting to record a series of videos on how philosophy as reaction actually destroys what we value. That'll probably be done alone. I'm going to do a whole bunch of videos on philosophy of science, where we will discuss issues such as if an institution is systematically corrupt, how should that affect our behavior to knowledge produced by that institution? You can see spicy topics. But today, and we'll go into all sorts of virtues. Today we're talking about Andrea. Manliness, courage. I know that equivocation in ancient Greek is, what's the glitz word of the day? Problematic from our society's perspective. We'll just keep it for the moment. We're not going to problem it. We'll just accept this definition. And if we turn to the Tarzan books, which are the series of volumes authored by Edgar Rice Burroughs in between, what was it, 1912 and 19... Actually, I think he kept publishing them till his death. Like, it was 1912 to 1953. He wrote 30 books. I did not get I don't have the exact... It was a ridiculous period of time because he wrote it during and after the war. He also wrote John Carter of Mars. Those are his main the two series he's best known for. I quite like Pellucidar, and actually, now that I think about it, it's not in the notes, so I'm going to upset. I'm also going to discuss The Cave Boy, which is a very obscure standalone novel by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Sorry, but yeah. We're going to discuss and how is what does it mean to be a man in these works? Would you like to start, Hound, or should I?
So yeah, I think we're kind of setting up a rather convenient, not quite straw man to pit Edgar Rice Burroughs against. And I want to be clear here that we are using this as a possible example of a model of masculinity. We're not necessarily saying Edgar Rice Burroughs is the be-all, end-all here, or even Plato or Socrates. We are exploring the themes through them, I guess you would say.
Yeah, it's a method in pedagogy. It's called case study analysis, basically.
Yes.
It's very, very common. For those of you who ever study like the Chinese or Jewish philosophical traditions, I think even the Islamic one, not as familiar there. They tend to reason morally based on case studies. That was a popular method in Europe during the medieval period. And to some extent in ancient Greece, they had very complex views on empirical phenomena. But in the medieval period, that was the norm. It fell out of favor during the Protestant Reformation in favor of rationalist schemas. So we'll be using test cases, basically, where we look at one and we look at another, and we analyze the consequences, and from these we try to draw the eternal verities of God Most High, to use a bit of a hackneyed phrase from the 18th century. So yeah, we will be looking at Tarzan, we'll be looking at Plato, and then the straw man you mentioned, that would be Andrew Tate, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is the case of Andrew Tate versus Tarzan.
Yes. Yeah, we'll be focusing on his teachings specifically. I know that sounds a little... the teachings of Andrew Tate. No, his tweets, what he's written about in books and speeches. What a year, man. The teachings of Thomas Aquinas are 3,000-page books, and then
and Andrew Tate is eternal lawgiver.
Eternal lawgiver. Yeah, not in a mean way. To be very, very clear, like we're going to compare and contrast the two, but I wish nothing but respect for the man. But yeah, so did you want to say anything about masculinity and say John Carter, or should I start?
You can start.
Okay.
I'll kind of pick up as it go and kind of compare my experiences, because I have not. Well, philosopher here has read all sorts of varied Edgar Rice Burroughs, but I, as a much more basic bitch, have only read John Carter of Mars and some sequels. So I have a more limited grasp, but I have enough to keep up, I believe.
Okay, so Edgar Rice Burroughs, fascinating man, paradigmatic Victorian. You talk about the stereotype of a Victorian, you're pretty much looking at Burroughs. Mostly, I think the only major, so you have like the stiff upper lip was the expression, very do it. I want to say do it yourself. There's that famous poem Invictus, and it's like by my own strength I shall conquer fate and traverse the great boundaries across the ocean. That is not what it says. That's the gist of the poem. Let me get the actual. This is William Ernest Henley. Yeah. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. I love that poem. I disagree with it, but it's such a beautiful, beautiful poem. Brilliant work of art. But yeah, Burroughs, in many respects, very typical Victorian understanding of what it means to be a man. In other respects, very different from the stereotype of a Victorian. The view that the Victorians thought children were so innocent they couldn't be exposed to violence is mostly a weird stereotype. Like, you look at Treasure Island, and you have people being trampled to death by horses, Wind in the Willows, and got the Badger kicking open the door and dual firing his pistols into a crowded room. Like, these were Victorian kids' books. The sanguine sweet reputation, not true. So in that respect, I would say he bucks the stereotype, but so does every other Victorian writer. Actually, we should discuss Robert Louis Stevenson. Sorry, totally random side thought there. Stevenson wrote Treasure Island and Jekyll and Hyde. Was a big writer of horror stories, children's literature, and adventures. But anyway.
So why are we discussing? Why are we talking about Andrew Tate and Tarzan in the first place? What do we have to gain?
Hound, he's like, oh, he's on a digression. Stop. Yeah. Okay. So what do we have to gain here? Actually, that's probably a better place. Yeah, we'll backtrack. I know you just listened to me ramble for 6 minutes before I could get to Burroughs' understanding of masculinity, and now we're backtracking to why do we care about Burroughs' understanding of masculinity.
I thought it would be a good thing to bring everyone on board here.
It's okay. Yeah. Why? So, we're going to talk about Bill. Have I ever tell you why I hate Bill Nye the Science Guy?
You might have, but
yeah,
I do not remember, and you should probably tell other people.
I should just take it for granted. Just take it for everyone here knows the private content.
If I know what you think about Bill Nye the Science Guy, I'm sure the audience also knows what you think about it.
Yes, precisely. One of the things that really annoyed me all the years I've been in academia still continues to drive me nuts. And as I don't like, I was joking when I say, hey, Bill Nye the Science Guy, totally normal individual. I feel nothing about him. But one of the things that drives me nuts in academia is the very popular assumption in academia that if something is geared to the public, it can be dumb as bricks and it doesn't matter. Like, you'll bring up all the historical and philosophical howlers in Carl Sagan, in Bill Nye the Science Guy, and Neil deGrasse Tyson. Nothing against these three. I'm just using them as examples here. And people blow it off because they're science educators, so they don't need to know. They don't need to have accurate views on the history or nature of science. And you see this with, not that philosophy is a popular subject, but the books that have been put into pop philosophy, very similar, low standard, lots of gaffes. who wrote the one Aristotle's Way? I dropped the book 10 pages in because she completely misunderstood the entire essence of Aristotelian philosophy. She translates telos as the empirical study of nature. She's like, Aristotle wants us to study nature just like a scientist. I'm like, no! And then she says that because Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all accepted Aristotelianism, therefore it's irreligious. Which anyone who knows anything about either the Aristotelian philosophy, which, let's just be clear here, is maybe not religious in the sense that some of you might be thinking of. It's very theistic. And also, the reception of Aristotle was much more complex than, let's just take Aristotle, guys.
Yes.
It's heretical in Islam. It's heretical, and give Muslims credit, it's heretical for. I don't actually agree with the reasons, but they're not arbitrary. Like, they didn't just ban Aristotle for poops and giggles. Anywho, the expectation is if something is geared to the public, it can be crap, and it doesn't matter. And actually, it should be the exact opposite. If you're going to give something to the public, it shouldn't be complex, because then the public won't grasp it without a whole lot of background. Not that the public is stupid, it just takes more work, but it should be accurate. We should be giving the public accurate information, because the information we give to the public is the information the public uses. Right? It doesn't matter how smart and knowledgeable the theoretical scientist John Schmirkenschmurf, who only studies like how slime mold reacts to being blasted with vinegar, is. He could be the smartest man on the planet. His impact on humanity as a whole, and especially on the public, is negligible. Unless he makes some amazing discovery, but even then, it's just the discovery that'll impact humanity. His understanding of science is peripheral. So when you see things like Bill Nye the Science Guy dismissing science, or Neil deGrasse Tyson dismissing, or not science, apologies. When you see things like Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson crapping on philosophy, even though it's philosophical activities that structure the scientific enterprise, it's a direct threat to the public's understanding, not just of philosophy, but of science. Which is an extensive way of saying that if Andrew Tate has horrible teachings on masculinity, and he does, and I say this as somebody who does believe in masculinity for very religious reasons. If Andrew Tate has terrible teachings on masculinity, and these teachings are spread to the populace, it doesn't matter how intelligent the teachings of academics are. Now, to be clear, most academics deny masculinity, but even amongst the ones that do, they have not had the popular impact that Tate has. Does that answer the sort of question here?
Yeah. But like, what? I guess the answer that I'm kind of fishing for is that our understanding of masculinity and modernity sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks ass.
Yeah, it's awful. It's really bad. Sorry. Masculinity was brutally eviscerated in the academy over the course of about 50 years between the end of the Victorian period and the 70s. And this has trickled down through the, what do you call, like the organelles of civilization, like media, public schools. It's to the point where there is no understanding of masculinity. It's not encouraged. The forms that are promoted are intensely harmful. I don't want to say toxic. I hate that word. But they're spiritually destructive to the people who do them, whether you're religious or not. Like, I know I said I'm religious, but I think we're secular. Heck, we're drawing on Burroughs here, who's an atheist. They're very, very destructive. It pains me when I see my my co-generationists listening to Andrew Tate, but I can understand why they do it, because who else are they getting it from? Like who's your role models here? The baby boomers? Sorry, Hound, I cut you off there.
Oh no, that's good. But I think also we're kind of using, like I said, we're setting this up as almost a straw man. I think it's Tate is more the peak of the iceberg that pokes up above the water, that has agglomerated atop everything everyone else is saying about masculinity too, even if there's might not be quite as vitriolic and obviously damaging in the immediate.
Yeah, Tate is the most explicit. He's the most popular representative who's not a total nutter, because we are purposefully not studying the teachings of Sneeko. He's the most popular representative of the tradition of Nietzschean masculinity, which is, I said Burroughs was Victorian. Nietzsche was technically also, tail beginning of the middle of the Victorian period, but yeah, also technically Victorian, but he represented like a very different Victorian strain. Burroughs is Burroughs and Nietzsche, they were both atheists, but they diverged on issues of emotions and the intellect, and how men should treat woman, not in a how men should treat woman, how men should treat the weak. Nietzsche's so I read Invictus 10 minutes ago. Succeeding by your own strength. Victory, that's Nietzsche's. It's his most famous teachings, the sort of will to power, which he equates with life and growth itself. Right, life is growth. Growth is the will to power. The more you grow, the stronger you get, the more alive you are. Consequently, ways of existence that are not growth are distractions, divergences. Nietzsche attributes them to ressentiment, envy. That's not a great translation. It doesn't capture the nuances, but for the purposes of our present discussion, we don't have to go into the depths of Nietzsche. We'll
probably have sequels on this discussions of masculinity later.
Oh yeah, probably another 10 videos.
Yes.
Yeah, going on and on this topic, but I'll go way more in depth on Nietzsche. I do have another video on Nietzsche that will probably go live sometime next week, which I recorded with another friend, where we go very much into Nietzsche's philosophy and how he thought the ideal life was lived. So I'll actually keep the remarks short and to the most salient points, are the ones that are most germane to Andrew Tate, which is Nietzsche hated the intellect. This is a massive statement there. Oh man, Nietzsche considered ideas to be an abstraction from reality. And so you see Tate talking about it's only experience that matters. Don't bother reading, bro. Which Tate, he converted to Islam, and then he's sitting there condemning reading, and it's like, what, man?
Don't bother reading, bro. I'm one of the people of the book. Also buy my book.
Yeah, he posted that message a day after he published a book, and the book had a typo in the cover. Forget opening the book. I'm looking at the front page, and I'm like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. Yeah, so reading is worthless.
All right.
But
So
basically, there is no intellectual manliness.
so yeah, your point was that Nietzsche basically espoused intellectual muscleheadism.
Yeah.
Philosophical muscleheadism.
Yeah. This is a somewhat an oversimplification of a more complex argument in Nietzsche. That is certainly how he was received, however, by most of his immediate successors, who I'm not going to name because I don't really want to bring. I don't. It would be slanderous to Andrew Tate to bring them up in conjunction with him,
Yes.
even if like they are working in a downstream line of theory. But Tate gets more of his views on masculinity from pop culture.
Yes.
And especially like a lot of what he does is, I think, it's like a bad stereotype of what the average feminist thinks of manliness. Um,
Yes, but also because they're a bad stereotype. It's an acceleration of the problem, and we can hence use him as an example
yeah,
of an extreme version of what may have a problem with.
yeah.
He's a
As
great
I,
example. We'll probably reuse him. Uh,
yeah. Oh god.
he's a gift that's going to keep on giving as we keep on recording. Uh, but yeah, now you can return to Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Yeah, we'll return to Edgar Rice. So, how does Edgar Rice Burroughs understand manliness? His novels they're accused of being formulaic. This accusation is correct. However, it does not stop the fact that even though they're formulaic, they are all immensely entertaining. And I firmly agree with Ray Bradbury that Edgar Rice Burroughs was one of the greatest writers of all time because he taught young boys that they could be heroes. And that's what his understanding of masculinity is. It's heroism. It's expressed in an adventurous life, not necessarily a life lived going on like adventures to far-flung places. That's how he writes it in his novels, but it's more of an existential attitude than it is a physical activity. And connected to this, he has there's basically four maneuvers of manliness in Edgar Rice Burroughs. Uh, two of which are just very typical Victorian. One of which is well, actually, they're all Victorian, but they not in a just a couple in a stereotypical way. And this is going to be courage, Andrea, or manliness. Boethia, I am totally mispronouncing these Greek words here. Boethia is the virtue of protection. It shows up briefly in the Socratic corpus, not in the Laches. It shows up mostly in the. I want to say, it's either the Sophist or the Gorgias. Oh man, this is oh. It's
Here comes the digression where everything stops so that wild philosopher can find out.
I mean, Plato. Okay, Plato has is this guy. It's sophistry. So the sophist movement was a movement in ancient Greece that used wisdom to as a tool rather than as a search for truth, and argued that power is the only end of life, which is why Nietzsche liked them and why most postmodern theorists, okay, I won't say most, but a lot of postmodern theorists really like them. It's the sophist, sorry. Cratylus and the sophist argues with Socrates about the nature of boethia, and he asks how Socrates can protect his family, which is the main use of the word, family and dependence. So we'll get into that in a second. If Socrates is interested in the truth and not power. We're not going to keep things short. We're not going to get into the confines of their dispute. I will note that boethia, as I said, it means protection. In the Platonic or Socratic context, it refers to the ability to protect your family and your dependents, which would be slaves in an ancient Greek context. Obviously, in our own context, we're not looking at slaves. We are looking at your employees if you're a businessman, your citizens if you're the mayor. If you're in charge of an NGO that helps the homeless, it'll be the home. You're basically the individuals who depend on you. There's a Boethia. Then there's a virtue. The ancient Greeks, I'm going to give the ancient Greek word before giving it the translation in English. The word is epimeleia. I should have prepared a little card giving the Latin spellings of these words. But epimeleia, it's conventionally translated as discipline or self-control. It has the additional meaning of care. So I mentioned Burroughs is in one sense he's very Victorian because he's not encouraging aggressive displays of emotion. In another sense, he diverges from the stereotypical, and again, emphasis on the stereotypical because of course realities. Did I cut out though? Because reality's more complex than that. Understanding of the Victorian, and that he does have a positive role for emotions in the confines of his masculine behavior. And then the last two features, which aren't, I guess they're not virtues per se, but these are going to, these are going to be broness, friendship with other men, in a not no homo. Don't ban me, YouTube. In a friendship with other men in a platonic sense, and intellectual manliness. So a commitment to expressing the three virtues I just described: courage, protection, and discipline or care, in an intellectual and not just physical sphere. So this includes a willingness to confront inconvenient truths, a willingness to venture and discover new secrets. Some of his characters spend like years working away in libraries to discover secrets. Burroughs was an atheist, very fervent atheist. So for him, this also includes challenging religious teachings, which actually I don't. I was going to say I disagree with as a religious person, but I actually don't disagree with it. I disagree with the tenor maybe, but I agree with the ethos. Doubt is basic to faith, and it's basic to manliness. But that aside, and so returning to, as I said, his novels, formulaic. There's this sort of set sequence of events where individual who may have the classical manly traits from the get-go, he may not. But he goes on an adventure. He goes on, something happens to him, putting him in an unfamiliar world. So he's a normal person. He goes, and then through that world, he exercises these virtues, discovering new truths about reality, saving beautiful women from monsters, protecting the weak, really protecting the weak. Burroughs talks about Tarzan. The show is most well known if you've ever watched the movies. It's all the one where he kills all the animals, and to an extent that's accurate based on the books. But Tarzan also shows respect for animals in a lot of cases, and he shows respect for, and I'm not comparing, he shows respect for people who are not European, which, remembering that this was written in 1912, and Burroughs, in some respects, product of his time, did not agreed with everyone's favorite scientific species breeding regime, or species breeding method. Sorry, Burroughs was not a fan of the German approach, but in other respects, he argued for a much more positive view of Arabs and blacks in his works, in Tarzan, and in John Carter, which takes place in outer space. John Carter of Mars, right? It takes place on Mars. we see they're not even humans, they're just different sapient species of man-like beings, and we see the same like international bro union. Broness transcends boundaries and enables protection even for those who aren't our dependents. I don't know if you have anything you want to contribute.
No, I was about to use like the broness transcend species, but yeah, you beat me to that.
Yeah, Broness transcend. This happens in Tarzan too. This happened where he does forge genuine bonds with the monkeys and the lions, or not lions. Is it a black? Okay, in book 3, nobody minds if I do a little spoiler, eh?
Go for it.
Yeah, book 3. Tarzan and Jane are on a sailing venture, and their boat gets tipped over, and Tarzan gets separated from Jane. He's pursuing Jane. There's a bunch of other stuff going on. There's a Russian spy is also pursuing Jane. Not a spy from Russia, someone who is Russian and a spy, but in a low down. And like Burroughs was always a fan of being loyal to your homeland, good Victorian that he was. And thus his bad guys are mostly duplicitous figures. They're interested only in themselves and will willingly betray their nation or put their people in harm's way if need be. Which is another break from Nietzschean self above all. In Nietzsche's words, the superior man will only care for his weaklings once he's first allocated his power to himself. And he says that he'll only care for the weaklings because he feels a sense of pity by virtue of his greatness. I can get the exact quotes, but that's the gist of it. A glorious, glorious passage.
Great, good guy.
Yeah, great, wonderful human being. Amazing value system. But that aside, back to Tarzan. His bad guys are in it for themselves or for money, and they just abuse everyone around them. So this spy from Russia, this was before Russia went red and the West really turned against Russia. So there's not really the undertone some of us might be thinking, especially those of us who watch the news. Is pursuing him, and is pursuing Jane and trying to kill her to get back at Tarzan. Because of a whole series of events from the tail end of book 2 that we need not get into here. And Tarzan, as he's pursuing them, he keeps recruiting all these different, like, human beings, a whole bunch of other human beings that he just finds on his path, and all these random animals. I cannot remember, like, leopard, cheetah. My knowledge of giant cats just flew out the window, and I'm not going to bother looking it up because it's just an extreme big cat, big nom cat, and baboons or monkeys of some sort. And they're all eventually Tarzan gets separated, but his human monkey cat train continues his noble venture, and they start chasing the Russian down the river, and he's in this boat paddling for his life and screaming as this horde of monkeys, cats, and human beings runs down the riverbank trying to get at him.
Bro.
It's a hilarious power of bro. Can even transcend rational boundaries. I love Burroughs. But yeah, we see the same thing show up to a slightly less absurd extent in John Carter of Mars, where you want to talk about like 1910, 1920s writing. He's like, and then there were the red men, And the yellow men, not in like I know you're thinking it's like, oh, this is a nasty joke about the Chinese. No, he means people who are literally bright yellow. And they live in this frozen fortress, and they're all supposed to be space aliens, but this is way before sci-fi was really getting started. So his theory of space alien is like, yeah, but they would just be like human but bright yellow. So yeah, they are supposed to be completely separate. It's like the black man, like, oh god. Well, as you read these things and you're like, these did not have the undertones then that it has now. Like how I'm always recommending people read Arthur Macken's horror story, The White People. And they think it's some sort of racist. It's like, yeah, you should read about these horrible white people. And they're like, whoa. No, it's about demons. It's not about they're pure white, they're demons. There's no racial undertones. There are with Burroughs' Venus series, which we're not getting into because that would be a whole separate discussion. So normally his characters, John Carter's starts off masculine. Tarzan starts off as a baby and sort of he develops masculinity, but he's always sort of masculine. The reason it occurred to me that I should discuss the Cave Boy is the Cave Boy is about a shy and bookish young man who gets trapped on an island filled with prehistoric hominids and has to discover his inner masculinity to protect the cave woman he loves. So it's Burroughs' story of the development of masculinity. And it's interesting because in one level he does say, super bookishness undermines masculine virtues, which is fair. But in another sense, it's not that the boy abandons intellectuality, it's that he integrates intellectuality into his masculine virtues as he figures out ways to use his book learning for the betterment of the girl. Like it's a romance. It's a romance about a dweeb and a cave woman and their love story on an island of monsters. Heartwarming.
As one does.
As one does. Happens to me all the time. Happens to me all the time. But yeah. That's Burroughs. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add from John Carter.
Yeah, like we have discussed the bro themes. With John Carter, you get that same thing. You have like the green men who are a little less stereotypical humans, as they are green, but they also have forearms. So,
yes, Tarzan.
But yeah, it's like one of John Carter's best friends is green dude with forearms who originally captured him and kept him prisoner, but they became bros later.
The power of bro. The power of bro compels me.
We defeated the power of friendship and have surpassed it to the power of bro.
It's the power of bro. And yeah, I mentioned sort of intellectual virtue or intellectual manliness. Plato, he makes statements about how to be a man in many of his works. Contrary to what people think, it was actually super important to him. Nietzsche just seems to ignore this. He just seems to ignore. He's like, yep, Socrates was just the feeble and he didn't know how to be manly or whatever. And it's like, well, all our sources on Socrates, like Plato, Xenophon, Aristophanes. Well, maybe not Aristophanes, but Aristophanes is writing a comedy. And he's mocking Socrates, so whatever. But the other sources describe Socrates as being insanely buff and fighting nude in winter.
Absolutely,
as one does.
Chad Socrates.
Yeah, Xenophon's Memorabilia says that the only way you can be a man is if you fight nude in winter.
course, as one does.
As one does. Most important life. If you guys take any life advice from this talk today, it's fight nude in winter.
Be a man.
Be a man. Fight noon in winter. But in the most extensive discussion on courage or manliness, the Andrea is in the. I keep it. It's probably like Laches. I have no idea how you pronounce ancient Greek. And what's fascinating about it is, so the Laches is, for those who have literally no knowledge of Plato, we'll make this digression quick. The stereotypical Platonic dialogue is someone is standing around having a discussion and Socrates pops by and he's like, hey, what's courage? And the person gives him a definition of courage and then he like rips him apart brutally. And they give him another definition of courage and he rips it apart brutally. And they do this again and again until they end in a state of aporia or puzzlement. And one of the fascinating things about these Socratic dialogues is how often the doctrines Socrates rips apart are ones he held to. The Euthyphro is an amazing example. Socrates does in fact define piety as adherence to the dictates of the gods, and with the understanding that the gods are goodness themselves. Right. This is the conventional religious reply to the Euthyphro dilemma. This is also the view Socrates held. Yet Socrates gives no reply when a speaker makes the same suggestion in the dialogue, just hurrying it along, and he ends on a state of puzzlement. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Same in the Laches, they get definition after definition, and eventually they get the courage is the confluence of an intellectual willingness to confront fear, right, logos, with the physical willingness to confront fear, ergon, deed. That's word and deed. The confluence of word and deed. So our intellectual manliness is a reflection of our physical manliness, and the two inform each other. There's not like it's not either or. It's both simultaneously. And Socrates, this is the definition Socrates forwards in the Republic. This is the definition his speaker gives him in the Laches, and then Socrates just sort of like skewers it. Not for any compelling reason. His argument is like, but surely this would mean that doctors could have manliness. Because doctors can be courageous in this sense too. And his speaker's like, well, darn, maybe doctors just aren't manly. Or maybe this isn't what manliness is. And they end on a state of aporia. So they could go on and on. But one of the things that has been noted by philosophers exegeting Socrates, lesser extent by historians, is the extent to which the Socratic elenkos, this style of argument, is a teaching tool. It's not Socrates aiming at giving you a deductively super accurate conclusion. It's Socrates aiming at teaching you. And his answers are usually geared to the intellect of the person he's speaking to. Which we can often gauge because these are all very famous individuals whose writings or sayings or deeds survive in other works.
So you're saying that the teaching method is set up less to get the answer that Socrates wants and more to push his students into a state of questioning, to be courageous enough to question their beliefs.
But not in a sort of skeptical, like I'm going to get rid of it way. He wants to induce doubt to compel them to think deeper about intuitive truths. Fundamental to Platonism is the claim that we all know the truth in our souls. This is, as we can dispute this doctrine. Most people have not found it convincing throughout history, but it is there and it's guiding the. Socrates calls what he's doing maieudics, midwifery. bringing into being through inducing doubt. And so his hope is, it's clear from his discussion with the speakers and the lackeys that he thinks they're giving him a definition that they don't understand. Right. They're saying, oh, it's a confluence, it's this confluence of word and deed in the realm of courage, or, confronting one's fear. And Socrates is like, well, yes, but I'm not sure I'm not sure you actually understand what the logos, the word, is in this case. And so he gives a crappy argument that they accept because they don't actually know what they're talking about, to induce puzzlement, not because he wants them to stop being courageous, but because he wants them to think more deeply and thereby develop better understanding about the nature of courage.
All right. And so why would Nietzsche, and by extension Tate, think this is girly and gay?
Yeah, you know what? I have a full folder full of. It'll take me half a second to get my Nietzsche quotes up. We're going to read some Nietzsche quotes.
Fun.
Nietzsche. Oh man. Nietzsche's main argument is he is opposed to the existence of ideas. I know this sounds wild. Actually, maybe it doesn't sound too wild if you're a relativist, right? If you're been brought up in the sort of post idea. I don't like postmodern. I'm just using it as a heuristic term. But yeah, sort of postmodern world, ideas don't exist. And this is sort of Nietzsche's why, to quote from Twilight of the Idols, The Case of Socrates, paragraph 6, one chooses logical argument only when one has no other means. One knows that one arouses mistrust with it, that it is not very persuasive. Nothing is easier to nullify than a logical argument. The tedium of long speeches proves this. It is a kind of self-defense for those who no longer have other weapons.
If you can't hit them with your fists, you'll default to the sneaky and weak logic.
Yes. And earlier in the same work, when talking about people who believe in ideas, he said, why did humanity have to take seriously the brain afflictions of these sick web spinners? To invent fables about a world other than this one has no meaning at all, unless an instinct of slander, detraction, and suspicion against life has gained the upper hand in us. To be clear, Nietzsche was not a anti-knowledge in the modern sense of the word. He just understood knowledge in a very reductive sense.
All right.
But yeah. As I said, opposition to life, and then, beyond good and evil, paragraph 259. He says the aristocracy will have to be an incarnate will to power. It will arrive to grow, spread, seize, become predominant, not from any morality or immorality, but because it is living and because life simply is will to power. Right. So there's this will to power, and as I said, it would be... There is rather obvious explicit Nietzschean influence on Tate. You also see this, Elon Musk had some really wacky Nietzschean quotes on his timeline.
Everyone's favorite poster boy of masculinity, Elon Musk.
Yeah, I hope people aren't taking their views on masculinity from him. I don't know anymore. I look out at who has followers and who's being cited in the news, and I just sob. Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani. to quote Jesus. It's,
Paraphrase,
God.
what the heck, God?
Yeah. What the heck, God. But yeah, it's this understanding of strength. Obviously, Tate is. I mean, in Tate's case, he actually is talking about physical strength, partially. But there's another dimension to this, which for Tate is material success. I think
material power over others. Yeah, material power over others.
Yeah, material. Like his most famous statement, the one that made him really famous, was "Where's your Bugatti?" People would make a reply to him, and sometimes those replies sucked. So like a lot of them stank. Some were childish, some were idiotic, some were too heavily inflected by today's moribund feminist tradition. Some were good though, but Tate's reply was the completely irrelevant "Where's your Bugatti?"
So where is Tarzan's Bugatti?
Where is Tarzan? Yeah, where is Tarzan's Bugatti? I said, measurement of masculinity by material success, and the reason we wanted to, I guess, square Tate off against Tarzan is Tarzan's wealthy, right? Tarzan is Lord Greystoke. Greystroke. He is fabulously wealthy. He owns multiple properties on different continents. He is firmly a member of the English landed aristocracy. John Carter's a king. The cave boy I mentioned is, I think he's from the Bostonian banking class, which was and remains one of the wealthiest groups of individuals on the planet. Even nowadays, like 100 years later, their power is immense. Most of Burroughs' other protagonists are like they come into wealth or are born wealthy. Somehow wealth comes to them. And yet, so there's nothing wrong with wealth, per se. We can discuss money another time. And yet none of them let their money either define them as individuals or define them masculinely. They define themselves by their character. The virtues they have, which they exercise for themselves, like Tarzan does not go about self-effacingly sacrificing for women who hate him and mistreat him too. Like, he's not a simp. He respects women. He treats them well. He is not a simp, especially when he thinks the women do not have his best interests at heart. Burroughs even had a whole very obscure short story called, I think it's Jimberjaw, about don't simp, bros, basically. But he exercises his masculinity for himself and for other people to be a hero, right? Tarzan is a hero. He saves his wife. He saves all sorts of innocent civilians, like Arab tribes, African tribes, the French government, various American and English figures, sometimes even his enemies he'll save from peril. And he uses his wealth to finance these ventures. But the wealth is not valuable for its own sake. It's not really a measure of his character, nor is it a measure of how he treats others. It is a tool. And the reason one of the reasons where we've been flipping back and forth between Burroughs and Plato, or Socrates, is, have I mentioned the Economicus yet, Hound? I know I've just said Xenophon.
I don't believe you've mentioned the Economicus.
Okay, thank you. So I mentioned Xenophon was one of Socrates he had a whole bunch of disciples. There are 5 major ones who went on to found Cyrenaicism, which was the predecessor to Epicureanism, Platonism, Stoicism. Fifth one that just slipped my mind all of a sudden, but it was super important. And Xenophon, who never founded a philosophical school, but who in many respects was one of Socrates' most brilliant disciples. And other than Plato, he's our best source of information on Socrates. He tends to include a lot of really practical anecdotes about Socrates. Gives us a very different indication of who Socrates was as a man, which doesn't necessarily contradict Plato, but the Platonic Socrates is mostly Socrates engaged in convoluted intellectual disputes. Xenophon's Socrates does engage in intellectual disputes, but he's a much more practical figure who also does a lot of like normal things.
Yes, normal things like fighting naked in winter.
Fighting naked women. No, like Xenophon, Socrates, there's a lot of anecdotes of Socrates just going around being friendly and normal. And sometimes people compare the two, or contrast. Sorry to say, like, oh, well, you know, the Platonic Socrates was false, and I don't think they're false. I think they're recording two different facets of the same man. Plato, the more typical philosopher, is emphasizing the philosophical aspects. Xenophon, who was the paradigmatic aristocrat, he once led 10,000 men across all of the mountains of Anatolia in winter while being assailed on all sides by Persian armies, is focused more on Socrates, the noble. So one of his few treatises that survives is called the Economicus. This is the origin of economics, but it means laws of the household and refers to how do we run a household. Right, like, so you have the things you bring in and which you can maybe convert to additional income, which would be investment, and then you have how you use those resources for your household. And we're not going to go too into it, but suffice it to say that it's very much a treatise on like discipline and manliness, masked as a book on growing potatoes or grapes.
All right. And how's that affect our dialogue, our Tatian Tarzan dialogue?
It's basically like you have two figures or clusters of figures who on the surface are very similar. You have, like, they're wealthy, they are strong, they are assertive, and yet in many respects they're complete opposites.
Yes, I mean, is it Plato or Socrates who's a wrestler?
Plato means broad-shouldered. Yeah, he either won 2 or 3 golds at the Olympics.
So we've got Plato, who's a wrestler, and we've got Andrew Tate, who was a WWE fighter or something. Mixed martial arts. I forget.
And yet,
some stuff too.
And yet, the Socratic Burroughsian tradition of masculinity, sees masculinity as a form of self-cultivation.
Kickboxing, yes.
Yeah, self-cultivation in every sense of the word, to make yourself a superior human being, which manifests in good treatment of your bros and your other good human beings. Again, emphasizing that we're talking about protecting the weak, which includes women, because this is the 20s. You're welcome to have whatever personal view you want on that, but in context, it includes women. Without like letting them trample all over you, which is what the Nietzschean thinks that service to the weak means. It means that the slaves rule.
Mm-hmm. The weak stomp on the strong because they're jealous and hate the strong.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's in the words of Nietzsche, is the irony of Socrates an expression of revolt, of plebeian envy, ressentiment. And we see, I mean, as I said, not that we see the very similar stuff coming from the Tate school in a much more materialistic strain, in the sense of loving money, right? It's the pursuit of wealth. This is how Tate, I want to see, like, how he markets his courses. And there's nothing wrong with marketing a course. Let's be like, if I ever run a course series, I will market it. People have approached me about doing that before, so this isn't a purely hypothetical situation. But looking at how he markets it as a way of describing his beliefs, the whole emphasis is on increasing your paycheck and your total earnings.
Yeah.
And this is his measuring stick. Maybe not the measuring stick for manly, because I think he would say if you're weak and feeble and worth millions, you're not manly. But it's this very instrumental account of what it means to be a man.
Yep. And so why shouldn't we want this instrumental account to be true? Why, I mean, who hates having a Bugatti? Well, except people who don't like Bugattis and want a different vehicle.
Yeah. Before I answer that question, can I read? I found the quote from Elon Musk.
Oh, no. Go for it.
The axiomatic error undermining much of Western civilization is weak makes right. If someone accepts explicitly or implicitly that the oppressed are always the good guys, then the natural conclusion is that the strong are always the bad guys. Elon Musk, that's 26th of April this year. So, there's at least a dozen logical errors in that statement. I actually agree with Musk that thinking the oppressed are always the good guys, or people who call themselves the oppressed are always the good guys, is just ridiculous. Because basically every individual in history who's wanted to justify doing something horrible to another human being has first come up with a casus belli about how they're attacking us, right?
Yeah.
I could pick hundreds and hundreds of examples. So Musk, he's not wrong about that. The rest of it, it's not that he's wrong per se. It's there's so many errors and equivocations between things like oppressed and weak and strong and what it means to be all those things that you can't even analyze the statement. Tate has some similar ones. Tate has some. Oh, what was the one I complained about where he failed to do basic math?
I don't remember, but you're saying that he says, okay, these sound vaguely similar. They have some overlap, therefore they are the same thing. Therefore, I can use them interchangeably.
Yeah, weakness and strength and oppression are not. You can be super strong and be oppressed.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of different types of strength. They're not the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And you can claim to be oppressed and not be oppressed.
Yeah. Or claim to be weak. That's, Sun Tzu's The Art of War. People do that as a military tactic all the time.
Yeah.
The Tate quote was 70% of people are trapped inside of the matrix. 25% see the truth and complain. Only 5% take action and fight back. Do you understand? That's a mathematical error.
Yeah, the 5% just popped out of nowhere. Do they see?
Well, if 70% of people are trapped inside the matrix, and 25%, see the truth, and that either means that
it would be 100% are trapped in the matrix. 30% 30% see the truth, and then 5%, because they're stacked on top of each other. They're overlapping categories.
Yeah, yeah. But even if we wanted to, like, or 70% of, or yeah, 70% are trapped inside the matrix and don't know it. 25% see the truth and merely complain. Only 5% take action to fight back. That would be another equally valid way of phrasing it. And this is like, you want to talk, why do we care about intellectual virtue? It's because you cannot be an assertive man if you don't know how to communicate with basic sentences. But moving aside, like, why does this matter? Why, or not, obviously not that. That 25% see the truth. It's such a good quote. And then Robert Seppier replying to it. It's like, oh man, it's like making cash pimping girls on webcam and a brief career of violence in the ring is not freedom from the Matrix. It's like, oh, you know things are going well when Robert Sepper, the Atlantean theorist, decides he's safe to fight you in the intellectual arena. But anywho,
Sepper knows his weight class.
Basically, why does this matter? Like, to double back, there's two different ways of thinking about, like, when you say being loved and why do we want people to love us? We can reduce most forms of love to two overarching generalizations, right? There's being loved just for being who we are, and then there's being loved for what we do. And most people, like, they're contradictory impulses a lot of the time. Because people want to be loved if they do nothing good, and they also want to be loved for the good things they do. And if there's two...
Maybe expand on what we mean by love there, because I'm not sure a lot of people who are in the Tato sphere are going to be throwing around terms like love.
You what?
I said, maybe you want to expand on what we mean by love here, because I'm not sure. Perhaps a lot of people in the Tato sphere are going to be necessarily using that term.
Care for? Care for? We want, I don't know. We want people to care for us. Maybe in the Tato sphere, you're so hell-bent on being alone that you refuse other individuals caring for you. We can go really into the metaphysical weeds of what does it mean to love. Like, would you really want to go?
No, like, why is it? Why are we bringing love into the mix now in our discussion of masculinity?
We're bringing love into the mix, I guess, because, like, what was it? So masculinity, all virtues intersect. Right, we can cultivate one virtue to the expense of all, at the expense of all other virtues, but habitually we don't want to do that. The reason we talk about cultivating virtues is we want to become good. We want to be people of good character. Right. When we talk about cultivating manliness or like any of the virtues consisting, like courage, the ability to protect others, discipline. Yes, these things may be good on their own, but they're also good to making us ideal people. And part of, maybe I'm being, actually, I think maybe rejecting love is just part of the problem, if that's not part of your metaphysical anthropology. Yeah, maybe it's better to double back, explore the Tatian and then see if it's clear by implication. Proof by implication.
Yeah, because what I'm getting from these kind of messages is it's not even about being loved. It's about having enough power to get material goods, and material goods includes people who will tell you that they care about you, who you can then throw away.
Yeah, pretty much.
In a
Okay,
long
yeah, we'll
time.
double back for a second. I think the main issue with the Tadian, that's the wrong document. Main issue with the Tadian document, or Tadian doctrine, the success as masculinity, which we see, I mean, started with, like, Tate was the most influential. I've seen this from a whole bunch of other individuals, many of them jokes, like complete jokes. Not even going to name, I want to be like insults, just ad hominem at that point. But by measuring like deeds, your deeds as a matter of material success, you're basically you're instrumentalizing masculinity. Right. Masculinity is a tool, and as is your understanding of the rest of reality. And I said earlier, it's a lot of Tate's vision of reality. It reads like a really bad feminist. If I did not know better, I would think that Andrew actually when I first heard about the dude, I thought it was a feminist joke ad. And then I'm looking at him like, no, he's totally serious. He is 100% serious. Where it's the feminist argument. And I say feminist, a feminist, like obviously not all feminists or even most are about to believe what I'm saying, but it's definitely an argument that comes from the camp of self-identified feminists. Not that what I'm about to say has any impact on whether or not feminism is true. To be very clear here, let's just be. This is not. I said bad feminist argument because there's plenty better ones out there. This is not what our the bad feminist argument is men see the world only as objects. They do not see subjects. Their engagement in the world is to see everything as tools to be used and extracted, to employ a term from Marxism that I actually don't mind as much as I'm not a Marxist. This is a very typical argument. You see a similar argument show up in post-colonial theory about whiteness. Natives lived in a world of pure subjects, and then the evil white people came with their belief in objects, and eviscerate. This is and instrumentalized reality, and then they destroyed it because they were no longer treating things as subjects, they were treating things as objects. This is historically absurd, for the record. It's a hilariously nonsensical reconstruction both of the hundreds of distinct native religions, the hundreds of distinct native religions, and also of what it is European philosophers were and still are trying to do. Seeing the entire world as nothing but objects is an issue, but we do move through a world full of objects, and a lot of European philosophers were trying to integrate that understanding rather than just destroy objects. Which actually does play into our discussion of Tate. Because this bad feminist argument, and again, like, I'm not saying this because I want to poke at feminism any more than I want to poke at masculinity per se. I'm saying, like, this is just crap. It's just a crappy argument. There's crappy arguments for anyone who's listening and is a feminist. You encounter crappy arguments for every philosophical position. Unfortunately, sometimes they become very popular, but we can attack a crappy argument without attacking a position itself.
Yep.
I really hate Pascal's wager. Right. I'm a theist. I believe in God. I think we all should. That doesn't mean I don't hate Pascal's wager. It's an awful argument. It's such a terrible argument on so many levels. There's a whole bunch of other theistic argument. I'm not a big fan of like the 5 ways of Aquinas. I could go on, and point is, like, we can critique bad
Yeah.
arguments without critiquing positions.
This is not feminism debunked. But yeah, go
on. And this understanding, this equation of sort of masculinity with pure, like, power, pure power, like material success is a stand-in for power here. Tate, he's using his Bugatti as a status symbol. It's not that the Bugatti itself is amazing; it's a status symbol to flex his comparative, like, power over others. And this is, I mean, it is almost nothing in common with the vision of masculinity in the Victorian era I just described, or in ancient Greece. But it's also just a really terrible feminist stereotype. And the main issue with it, I guess, is it just instrumentalizes the world, and it instrumentalizes men. And that, I guess, does that sort of explain where I got into love?
I think so, right? Because love is a decidedly non-instrumental thing, right?
Pretty much. I mean, there's the love for being yourself. I'm going to quote, like, this is, MGTOW, like, men going their own way. One of their really popular refrains is, "Women are loved for existing, men are loved for what we do." And I'll give them, I'm not MGTOW, I don't agree with it, but that statement is true. Or it's an aggressive stereotype, but for all it's an aggressive, overgeneralizing stereotype, this is the like, loved for instrumentality versus being loved for just being who you are. But both are problematic. Both are.
Yeah, and I think it's almost pointing to one of the, I guess, launching off points behind where I think Tate is coming from, which is that this instrumentalization isn't just coming from women, right? It's coming from male expectations for other men, right? And Tate has kind of embraced that pure instrumentality.
Yeah, basically, like, he's embraced a really hardened form of that. And the reason I think this matters is twofold, right?
Mm-hmm.
One, I think, like, feminism was rooted, whether you agree with it or not, historically it was rooted in a desire to have women be loved for what they could do just as much as for being who they were. That may not be what it's like nowadays, but that was the historical impetus for feminism. And this was, if we think of these two types of love as two homes, or two spheres, the being loved for who you are is the home, being loved for what you do is going on an adventure. And both, as I said, both are problematic. Like, if you're just being loved for who you are, it can breed boredom or narcissism. That's the stereotype of participation trophies, right? But if you're only being loved for what you do, and there's no value assigned to you as a person, just for existing, that causes immense depression. Like, it rips you apart. You can't trust anyone, because if you lean on them when, like, you're down, they just let you go. They do not catch you. That's the pure instrumentality. And so it's the Tatian view, and the reason I've been contrasting, like, really, this is a philosophy channel. Why are we going after Andrew Tate? The reason is it's an issue, problematic on two fronts, right? On the one front, I think men do have a desire to just be loved, right? When we go looking for a prospective spouse, yes, not that we don't want to be appreciated for what we do, not that masculinity isn't good, but I think not, like, the idea that you cannot be weak in front of your spouse is psychologically harmful for a lot of men. And if my evidence for this is pop under, like, any MGTOW or men's rights activist, or, like, anything in that, and just look at the comments. Right, look at the comments. It's you will not be loved just for being yourself. And
So,
Tate. Mhm. Oh, sorry.
so to kind of back us up, there are two overlapping spheres. Feminism, I guess, arises out of the need or out of like this compression of women into one of these spheres, and trying to kind of move at least more into the center uh, of that. And we can get into further stuff later.
Yeah.
But now we're dealing with kind of the other end of that, where men have been compressed into the far end of the other sphere of only being cared about for what they can do. And so the MGTOW argument is just abandon society, and Andrew Tate's argument is you are an object, deal with it, be more, get
Be more manly. Yeah. As I said, issue on two fronts. On the one front, it's just totally giving up that other sphere. On the other front, I actually think this is a terrible way of approaching objects and doing deeds. Right.
Yeah.
Like if you look at how did Tarzan or John Carter, or to pick a real person here, because Tarzan and John Carter are fictional, like Socrates, who was a military commander. He was a military commander. He was a politician. He was a public philosopher. How did they behave in the like? What were their deeds? And you find that their deeds they transcended the pure extraction, and instead entered the realm of creativity. Socrates was a creator. That was his sort of masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
He brought. I mean, he called himself a midwife. That was a metaphor. He could have called himself a blacksmith or sculptor, like bringing things into being.
Yep.
And I think Tate is not like a double pronged. Like on the one hand, it destroys this ability to be appreciated just as a person, like not for what you do, just as a person. But on the other hand, it destroys the work you do. Like it qualitatively reduces the work to pure instrumentality.
Yep.
And
all right. So yeah, back to love. So we've established that people do probably want love. It's probably a good thing. It's probably not the best to be purely concerned with material, viewing other people as material or yourself as material, right? Power by material.
Yeah, I mean, like it would be a little difficult. Like intellectually, I think it would be difficult to mount an argument that people have desires for an existence beyond working and making money. Which I know now we're getting into the realm of parodying Tate.
Yeah, well, what I've seen and what I think is going on is it's not that there isn't a desire to be loved there, but it is framed in like being appreciated or respected or things like that, right? It's framed in these much less feminine gendered terms, because I think love would kind of fit into that. Like, oh, you want love, kind of gay, bro.
Yeah. Well, and I will note at this, I've been using love. We are not singularly talking about romantic love here. Bro friendship also counts. So if you're really like, I don't really want to get married, and you're sitting here like, why are they talking about love? Like, I don't want to get married or whatever. Like Burroughsian friendship also counts, because there's multiple instances where these characters are at death's door. They've lost all their power. Their kingdoms are destroyed. Blah blah blah. At their weakest, and the other stands by them. Not because he thinks they'll be a useful tool later, but just because they're friends.
Yep. And not because you want to hang out with the dude who has the money and the Bugatti.
Yeah, the Bugatti. Where's your Bugatti? Yeah. I think is it. I want to say it's Tarkus that this happens most often to. I could be wrong.
Yeah, Tarkus is the name of the four-armed green alien in John Carter Mars.
Yeah, and Burroughs' no simping work was mostly a pessimistic reflection on whether women were capable of loving men that way. With actually Florence Nightingale had very similar complaints. The founder of nursing lived at about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Complained that woman, she worked with like men who'd been injured in war. That was her main role as a nurse, and complained extensively and very vituperatively about women who abandoned their husbands when they were injured, because the husbands were no longer providers.
Mm.
Let me see if I can find the. But yeah, I may not be able to find the exact passage, but yeah, that was the. I did in fact find it almost immediately. Yeah. This is. If you did not know a woman would write this, you would have thought this was from like a really stereotypical. I hate this expression, incel, like an incel board. Women crave for being loved, not for loving. They scream out at you for sympathy all day long. They are incapable of giving any in return, for they cannot remember your affairs long enough to do so. They cannot state a fact accurately to another, nor can that other woman attend to it accurately enough for it to become information. Now, is not all this the result of want of sympathy? I am sick with indignation at what wives and mothers will do of the most shocking selfishness, and people call it maternal or conjugal affection and think it pretty to say so. No, let each person tell the truth from their own experience. They really don't have any sympathy or the ability to empathize. They are always judging everyone and everything as a product on a social value scale that relates to their own egos and bounces off themselves. It occurs to me now I should have double-checked that this is a genuine passage. My apologies, if this is not, in fact, a genuine Florence Nightingale passage. Anyway, there's no capability for genuine feeling. This is what I have experienced with women. There is no capability for genuine feeling for other humans, or really in general, except when those feelings are for themselves, and the other people are just proxies to bounce ideas off of. Obviously, a harsh passage. I will again remind people that... Let me double check that this is real first. No, it's real. Yeah, it is real. I am finding multiple article. Okay. Fun. Anywho, as I said, published in the middle of wartime, probably should not be taken as a very impartial, rational statement of her views. Obviously is not our views. Do not cancel us. Or if you're going to cancel us, at least not for that. But yeah, we can see, like, Florence Nightingale lived about the same time as E.R. Burroughs. Similar worry for like similar values. You still there, Hound? Everything all right?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I said, yeah, no, we'll have plenty of spicy takes later. But yeah, I really
probably not that one though.
Yes, I do really like this idea, and I think we'll probably expand on it later, these ideas of two spheres of being loved and how being at extremes of either of these, or just kind of extremes at all within kind of these ideas of masculinity and femininity can, to use the term, be very, very toxic.
Yeah, I hate that word. Sorry. Oh man, I hate that word. I know what you're using, but yeah, we're still returning then. I think the real contrast here. I mean, it's twofold, right? One, Tarzan is a model of heroism, right? It's not just a vision of like how to be a man. It's a vision of how to be a hero. I mentioned that when I started this massive lengthy talk, that one of the like Ray Bradbury, considered guy who wrote Fahrenheit 451, real, in case anyone's sitting there going, why is he keep bringing this guy up? Ray Bradbury considered Edgar Rice Burroughs the greatest novelist of all time because he taught young boys that they could be heroes.
Yeah, you mentioned that quote.
And so there's on the one, there's this difference of how do we live our lives. This whole idea of an adventure and of masculinity is consisting in an adventure is, I won't say it's missing in the instrumentalist account that you get, not just from Tate, but from a whole bunch of other Twitter men's gurus. But it has been capiched in or cut up into emotionless and purely rhetorical dreck.
So Tarzan strong, Tarzan have money, Tarzan have bitches.
he has one. It's not, but Tarzan. Okay, this is 19th century science for you. Tarzan teaches himself to read without being able to speak at the age of 5 using a book. In case anyone is wondering, that's developmentally impossible, but more to the point, it does signify Burroughs' attitude to the intellect. Like Tarzan's journey, almost before becoming Tarzan, the like vine swinging lion wrangler, his journey starts with an intellectual act. And then moves on into physical acts. He teaches himself when he first meets Jane, or what his first words with Jane are in fluent English with a slight French accent. No, me, Tarzan, you, Jane. That was I mean, I know Burroughs liked the movies, but that was an unnecessary add-on that I think has impacted the book's image way too much. And yeah, I think, and then so yes, on the one end you have this sort of issue of heroism, and on the other end you have a question of values. Right? Why do we want to be men? Well, obviously, of course, we're biological men. Why do we care about being men? Like, why is this valuable to us? And Tate, to be totally fair to the dude, he's not mounting a idealistic argument. He's mounting a pragmatic argument, and he is right that especially nowadays, you are not going to get much sympathy for being weak as a man. Because you're not supposed to ask, you're not supposed to make demands. You're not really, like, if you're weak, no social organization will really help you unless you have some other infirmity, such as even then, I can think of some real disgusting stories from charities I've seen that turned men away for really ridiculous reasons. The black men need to confront their internalized misogyny before receiving anti-schizophrenic treatment is one of them. I was personal witness to that one. But yeah, and then of course, as a man, you're the one who has to foot the bill for all those social programs that you don't have access to. So to we'll give him full credit here as we wrap things up. Pragmatically speaking, yeah, he's correct. This is a purely instrumental account. I think the bigger issue, for me, I'm hoping for you, is embracing it rather than seeking a way out or a way beyond. Not just for, say, finding love, with a woman or with other human beings or with animals. Like, my dogs love me unconditionally. Only people who do. Well, my parents. God bless them. But also because it's just a threat to all the positive elements of masculinity in the first place. It just reduces all of the adventurous and virtuous traits of being a man to where's your Bugatti? I don't know if you have anything else to add, Hound. Otherwise, I think we can wrap things up here.
Yeah, no, that seems a good comparison, and why one definitely seems to come out on top.
Yep. Alrighty. So next week, quick reminder about this. I think we can stick with 9 for the moment, if that works for you.
Yep.
Yeah. We will be discussing Delicious in Dungeon, the recent anime, like autism in media, and just the basics of what does it mean to actually represent someone. Not in a hyper-political way, for those of you who are sitting there. It's like, oh, he's going to talk about representation in media. We're not looking at that. We are going to be looking at epistemic charity, the actual meaning of the word accommodation in, I won't say a purely non-political sense, but a fairly decisively non-political sense, because I am not in representation gang in that sense. But with that, I am Wild Philosopher, he is Hound, and we will see you next week.
Yeet.